Hello, my dear unknown friends. I'm Joyous Mysteries, and welcome back to the channel. Today I've pared down the setup because I'm gonna try to explore something in a particular way, and I think the best way that I can describe the best way I'm able to describe what it is that has sort of come to me after taking some time to think about the implications of the Cosmic Icon by Wolfgang Smith, or as conceived by Wolfgang Smith. It brings to mind certain imagery and concepts which I've encountered, or which I feel as if I have encountered in places such as the 3 books of occult philosophy, Catholic theology, Thomas Aquinas, Dionysius the Areopagite, Proclus, Iamblichus, and in yeah. Pardon my rambling. I know rambling isn't always everyone's cup of tea when it comes to videos like this, but alas, as I've warned in my channel trailer, this is mostly just me getting ideas down. And if any of you find some of these thoughts and these explorations of benefit, then it's secondary to what it's secondary, and I'm happy if you do find it useful. But ultimately, it is for this is all for me to get my ideas down when I don't have time to sit and write by hand. As much as I love writing by hand, sometimes this can be a little quicker to get things down. So, back to the subject at hand. The implications of Wolfgang Smith's Cosmic Icon. If you recall, I used it as sort of the thumbnail and background of the installment from Sources of Sophiergy, wherein I read an essay by Wolfgang Smith on astrology and how he basically disproves not disproves, but he restores the proper understanding of astrology and dispels any worry of superstition in the prudent and informative practice of it. And so I thought that we would explore with some visual representation the Cosmic Icon, how it applies to Sophiergy. So, if you recall, the outer circle, or the circle in general, represents the corporeal world. And under his, and by Smith's understanding and how he explains it, the corporeal world is subject to both time and space, and that things that arise within the corporeal world are both quantitative and qualitative. And perhaps it could be argued that the further from the center one goes, the less corporeal things become, the more chaotic things become, which interestingly is a sort of a harken back to some Jordan Peterson and his idea of, the Ouroboros representing chaos, the outer limits of what is known. And then you can see also Jonathan Peugeot in his interpretations of iconography. The further away from the center of being you go, the more chaotic things become, which often is represented by water. So here at the fringes of like here right up to the circle is that chaos, the water, the deep wherein the Leviathan awaits to devour the poor souls that are drowning in sin. And then, of course, the closer one gets to the center, the closer one comes to to that which informs everything else. And then there's this intermediary plane, which Smith often represents as a line. I could draw it out. He represents it as a line. And then there's the reflection of what he calls the Ave Eternal. And as I understand it, the purpose of the points in the cosmic icon are to represent the principle that actually underlies the alchemical tradition, the Hermetic tradition. As above, so below. As below, so above. It can also be seen as within, so without, as well, if you want to take it more on the horizontal plane. Now, Smith, if I understand him correctly, the outer circle also represents the horizontal. The line represents the vertical, and the point represents the Ave Eternal. It represents the that which is higher than the intelligible, represented by the line, or the plane between the center and the edge. So he refers to this as the Ave Eternum. He refers to this as the intelligible, sometimes the intermediary, but this line is the intelligible. And then this is the corporeal. Another way that he puts it is corpus, animus, spiritus. And so in my thinking and pondering over the cosmic icon, I began to wonder. It drew to my mind some of the nominal parlance, some of the the words used to describe spirits that is often employed, both in philosophical literature, theological literature, as well as occult literature. That being specifically the concept, or not the concept, the spiritual often being referred to as the intelligible, and that individual spiritual entities in and of themselves often become referred to as intelligences. We see this especially in Agrippa, where there is often quite a lot of reference to the spiritual as to the spirits as intelligences. In some places, Agrippa does seem to distinguish between an intelligence and a spirit, an intelligence and an angel, an intelligence and a demon, and intelligence against an individual genius. However, as of right now, I can't say that. I can't necessarily say that I agree 100% with Agrippa on this. And so, for the time being, is based on as far as my understanding is able to, the angels, the demons, and anything in between, if there is anything in between, which hard to say. So I'm going to play it safe, and for the purposes of brevity, I am just going to refer strictly to angels and demons. To my mind, I would say that both angels and demons are intelligences, and it should be worth referring to them as intelligences. And one of the reasons why I lean in that direction is because, technically speaking, the demons are also technically still of the same genus as the angels. They still occupy the same ontological level. Because it's ingrained into their very being. The difference is that they follow their own will versus conforming to God's will. And that distinguishes an angel from a demon. Technically, they are both angelic, but a demon in the Christian sense is an angel opposed to God's will, even though at the end of the day, they still somehow manage to accomplish God's will without them really understanding how or why, because God uses all things to work towards the good at the end. But don't take that statement too far and assume that I'm one of those reasonable hope that all men are saved sort of folks. So let's not go down that road for the purposes of this video, and I might not even cover it cover that topic. It's covered much better elsewhere on YouTube. So, in the original depiction of the cosmic icon, there's just the one circle, the one line, and the 2 points that correspond to each other, if one wishes to use that word. And of course, it shouldn't be too hard to infer what using that word implies. But you'll notice that I've added on to the icon, and in fact, I'm gonna do away with the lines here, the line for the time being. Okay. So we have the cosmic icon. I've added this circle that's distinct. You will notice it's distinct from the corporeal, but it resembles the corporeal in shape, albeit it does not resemble the corporeal in its radius from eternity. And so, but it's along, this circle is a different, it represents a different ontological position within the plane between the corporeal and the aeternal. And so what possibly would this second inner circle represent? Well, if you've been able to put 2 and 2 together so far, you should be able to guess that this circle represents a specific level of ontology that exists as almost an intermediary between the corporeal and the aeternal. And it is this position, it's this ontological position that could possibly be used to describe where intelligences sit within existence. So if we bring back this point here, we're now going to add an entity. And if you want to as well, the plane, the intelligible plane connecting the aeternal to the corporeal, can certainly be thought of as the what is it? The pleroma. Let me look it up real quick. I believe it's the pleroma. No, the pleroma. There it is. Forgive me. Being in the medical field, I'm thinking of the pleural space between the bronchial tree and the outer layer of the lungs. But no, the pleroma, which comes from the Greek, which literally means fullness, which I think that's interesting. But the word literally means fullness, from the verb plero, to fill. Well, that's rather apt, because we've got between the ave eternal and the corporeal, the space within is filled. What is it filled with? Intelligences. Be they angels, demons, what have you. This is the implication that I seem to be deriving from the basic conception of the cosmic icon, what it represents and what it means. But it doesn't just end there. Not only can we divvy up various places along the intelligible plane, which can be used to describe, your choirs of angels. The closer the angel is to the source of to the source of everything, the less they are affected by the more as we approach closer to that which is eternal, perhaps the appearance, if we ever do obtain sight of these entities, tend to be your cherubim and your thrones, your seraphim, the more daunting depictions in scripture of the angels, the wheels within wheels, the circles turning upon themselves, some of the scarier imagery of angels. I would imagine we would find the closer the said entity is to that which is truly eternal, or that which eternity emanates from. I don't know if emanates from is the right phrase to use. Again, these videos, I'm just kind of part of it's spitballing, again, just to get ideas down for my benefit, and then tangentially, if it benefits you, that's wonderful. So in Smith's description of the cosmic icon, which describes the cosmos as tripartite, just as God is tripartite, and as we are tripartite. It's like this tripartition is it's almost fractal, which is interesting to think about as well. But the way he describes it, you have the corporeal, which is subject to time and space. Then you have the intelligible, the line, or the plane between the circle and the point, which is subject to time but not space. And then you have the ave aeternum, which is subject to neither time nor space. And so, in using the cosmic icon to ponder the celestial intelligences, one can imagine then that the higher an entity is ontologically, the less subject to time it is. So if there's a higher entity that is closer in proximity on the intelligible plane to us, it will be more subject to time than an entity that is higher ontologically. Now, how I came across this perspective on the cosmic icon actually has everything to do with my daily prayer life, specifically my recitation of the Holy Rosary. And it's in my meditations, specifically, it was specifically the joyful mysteries that this all sort of came to fruition in my understanding. And the reason for that is, while the typical cosmic icon, with just the 2 points, the one circle and the one line from point to point, suddenly, when meditating on the Annunciation, that's when the third point that represents the higher ontological entity came to mind. Why? It's very simple. And this is why the cosmic icon is just so incredibly brilliant. It really is. And it's because you have God the Father willing for our salvation, and he is prepared for the second person of the Trinity to finally manifest corporeally. And so he sends Gabriel, who is probably about yay. You know, if I were to say draw 10 circles, the 10th being the corporeal, right? And the first being just around the point. Gabriel, who's often associated with the ninth Sephiroth, right? The one closest to us, would be an entity that is the most subject to time amongst all the other intelligible entities or intelligences. So at the Annunciation, you have God willing to be manifested truly and fully in flesh. And then you have Mary, who is probably one of the most prayerful human being to have ever lived on the planet. And her whole life has led to this moment. And actually, let's take this a little step further. So we'll say Mary's over here, and we'll say Gabriel's over here. All right. God's will is beaming straight down to a certain point and a certain time in history. And Mary is living her life deep in prayer And Gabriel gets the memo. It's time. So Gabriel is here. Gabriel would be here before Mary ever would be. Again, because ontologically, Gabriel is less subject to time than Mary due to Gabriel's proximity to eternity. And so finally, Mary finds herself at the one place, at the one time, exactly where God, exactly where God wanted her to be. And because of her relationship prior to God through prayer, she was able to perceive that which was ontologically higher as soon as she reached the crosshairs, so to speak, or the crossroad, the threshold, the place where the place where God wanted someone to be and who was willing to put themselves there, which represents a union of wills, which harkens us back to the third letter in Meditations on the Tarot, on the Empress. The crown that the Empress wears is composed of two layers representing the two wills that have to be united in order for the sacred magic to happen. And how does Tomberg end the chapter? By referring to the incarnation. When does the incarnation happen? At the Annunciation. And the cosmic icon fits this so perfectly, as well as, you know, any miracle that occurs in Scripture fits the pattern laid out by the cosmic icon. This Wolfgang Smith really is a genius. So you have Gabriel is there announcing to Mary. Now, here's the interesting thing. Mary still has free will, okay? When it's announced, in fact, let's do this. All right. So Mary is the target, and she's over the target, so to speak, because she's corporeal. She's subject to space and time. She's in the right place in space at the right time, corporeally. God sends Gabriel. Gabriel announces to Mary that she's basically been imbued with graces. She's reached the point where she is full of every possible grace, humanly possible, and is now given a choice. She is, by Gabriel appearing to her, she has now been she now can see directly God's will. She can see what God is willing, what He has chosen. She's seen God at work, and Gabriel is there almost to remind her that she can choose. She can choose to become the mother of God or not. It's totally up to her. And because of her love of God, she wishes to be united to his will. Again, there has to be the union of two wills. And in order for there to be a union, or for anything miraculous to take place, both wills have to be free to choose to unify. And so that's what she does. She chooses to unify herself with God's will. And so, from this point on, wherever God wills, Mary knows where to go, and she goes there. If he wills to go there, Mary goes there. Okay? So then after the Annunciation, what do we have? We have the Visitation. And this one I thought was rather interesting. Let's see. I think I have another little magnet here. So you have Elizabeth. Cousin Elizabeth is slight journey away, up into the mountains, I believe. I believe Elizabeth lives in a mountainous region. And so after the Annunciation, not only was it God's will for Mary to go and visit Elizabeth, but it was also Mary's will. Mary's will projected outward into the future. And she could recognize that God was pointing in that direction as well. So what does she do? She goes to visit Elizabeth. And what happens? What happens at the visitation? This is where this is where Tom Berg's conception of sacred magic, I think, really shines. So first, let's clean up a little bit. I'm going to redraw these circles. All right. We're going to stick with one circle because now we're going to zoom in. We're going to zoom in. And now at the center of the circle is Mary and Jesus united in one flesh. They share this. God shares the same flesh as Mary. In fact, you could argue that all of Christ's DNA in his physical body derives only from Mary. He's like purely genetically a male copy of Mary. But anyhow, that's an aside. All right. So now we have Mary. And we have Elizabeth. So what happens at the visitation? All right, we've zoomed in. Mary has arrived to her cousins. And how does we should already have an idea at this point, I would hope. So what happens? Both women possess within themselves a child. All right. And in fact, you could say, like, Elizabeth has, Elizabeth herself is a cosmic icon in miniature, right? The cosmic icon is fractal. All right. And then Mary also, within her is Jesus. right? And what happens at the visitation? John leaps in the womb. Why? Perhaps because children in the womb possibly exist ontologically higher, and so are able to see things. Possibly, their souls are possibly able to see things far more clearly. And so what is it that drives Mary to visit? It's her love of God, and the love has so overwhelmed her that it requires an outlet. It has to get out. She's brimming forth. It's exuding from her, but not within space. It's exuding out of her in time, in the intelligible realm, in the intermediary, in the intelligible or astral plane is where this love exists, and it's so strong because she is literally filled with God himself. That the connection is instantly made. A direct connection is instantly made. And Elizabeth receives it. And in fact, it could be argued, so Jesus in the intelligible realm is connected in addition to being physically connected. And it comes from Jesus through Mary and then into Elizabeth, into John. To show it another way would be something similar to I'd say, golly, how do we want to put this? We'll say you have Jesus, Mary, Elizabeth, and John. So we'll say Jesus, Mary, Elizabeth, John. Okay. I'm not sure what to call this. I'm not sure what to call this, but this is what comes to my mind when I go from the cosmic icon with Gabriel there as the Annunciation. This is the visitation, and then the nativity The nativity, I would imagine, would be something akin to this is God. Okay. This is Mary. This is Jesus. This, I would say, would be the nativity. You know, if we zoom out a little bit, if we zoom out a little bit more, Jesus and Mary are more like that. But if we zoom in really close, again, the cosmic icon is fractal in nature. This would be the nativity. I'm not a mathematician. I am a lousy armchair philosopher at best. Along with being probably an equally lousy theologian, armchair theologian. But I just felt that it would be worthwhile to share these ideas and to get them down. I've been kind of mulling over them for a while. Still may not fully understand some of the diagrams that come to mind as they relate to the first three joyful mysteries, which are quite pertinent to the current season. But I'd be curious to hear if any of you have any ideas about where this train of thought might be going. And I think these particular insights, I don't think that I'm meant to fully grasp them by my own. I feel like it needs to be shared for the rest of us to come together and meditate on these things in unison. But one thing seems to be crystal clear to me with all of this that I've just shared with you. There's something incredibly simple to divine mysteries that so many that it's even possible to simplify the direction of it's almost like some of these diagrams that I produced for you here, they almost look like electric diagrams, like circuitry diagrams of circuitry. And what is it? What is the circuit? It's grace. It's God's divine energy, his active will at work. And it's our place in the pleroma is to unite our will with God's, especially if any of us are going to strive to be saints first and foremost, and then only secondly, if we want to consider ourselves to be Sophiergists or sacred magicians, as Tomberg would say, that it requires us to be in cooperation with God's graces. And if you recall the circle and the line coming out from the center, Smith often says that there doesn't have to be a line. A simple dot in the center of a circle suffices. And that he just uses the line to designate that there's this intermediary plane. But I actually would take his conception of his own icon and expand it. That, yes, there's the pleroma between the center and the periphery. But the line can be used to represent God's will. Where God's will is most concentrated. And of course, he's omnipotent. He can send out any number of lines from his position in eternity out into the corporeal. But, on an individual level, for each person, he's beaming, he's sending out his will to a particular place at a particular time for each of us. And it isn't like there aren't signposts. And it isn't like there isn't a way to determine where God's pointing, right? Discernment of spirits and all the other various exercises in Christian spirituality that are for the purpose of uniting our will with God's ultimately. And so, and this is where Smith's understanding of astrology comes in. It's not so much a superstition that predicts the future. No, it can't. It can never accurately predict the exact actions of human beings, either at a large scale or a small scale. At best, it's the most likely trend that the language of astrology signifies. But and this is something that Tomberg touches on as well in the 3rd chapter of Meditations on the Tarot. This idea that in the garden, if Adam and Eve were to eat from the tree of life, they wouldn't go up to it and yank the fruit from it. In fact, I would argue, and my memory isn't quite the best to recall. But there almost seems to be this implication in this idea that Tomberg presents, where, well, if you can't take the fruit from the tree of life by force, how do you eat from the tree of life? If a fruit from it has fallen to the ground and rotted, it's no good to eat. So how does one eat from the tree of life without taking? The answer is very simple. You have to read the tree. You have to, you have to be able to recognize the signs that the fruit is just ripe enough that it's ready to fall off the tree. And so you have to physically walk up to the place where you can clearly see the fruit is going to fall. And then you just hold your hands out and you wait for it to fall into your hands. And then you eat it. You commune with that. You commune with God in that act of receiving. And this is diametrically opposed to what happens with the tree of knowledge. Unlike the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, Adam and Eve had to go up and yank the fruit off. That, or they fell for the temptation of not having to wait for the fruit to fall off when it was ready. I wonder if that's it. I wonder if that's the difference between eating from the tree of life and eating from the tree of knowledge. It's perhaps some fruits can be detrimental to our health if eaten before they are ripe. And so perhaps at some point in God's own time, maybe they would have eaten from that tree. But instead of seeing whether or not those fruits would ripen and fall, they chose to go and upon the temptation, they chose to actively yank and take the fruit of knowledge of their own will. And also remember too, God forbade to eat from that tree, which means his will was not pointing in that direction. And so where God isn't pointing, there nothing will ripen. And I would say we could say we see this repeated in the miracle that Peter performs to the lame Aeneas, which is the example that Tomberg uses in the 3rd chapter of Meditations. And it's the same pattern. It follows the cosmic icon. Wherever you are corporeally, and wherever God is pointing You have to be able to see where he's pointing, and you have to go there. And it's only when you arrive is anything accomplished, because it requires the union of two wills. And so whether it is making astrological observations, whether it's, I don't know as of right now, whether casting lots plays into this. It might. I have a good deal of research to do on that, but before I get into that question, there's a lot of study that is required of me. But eventually I will get around to that subject. In the meantime, let's I'll leave myself and you all with some homework, and that is to apply the cosmic icon to the story of the three magi. With all the astrological connotations that holds, and just ponder that. And then also take into consideration that in some depictions of the three magi, when they finally arrived to the stable, that they are depicted with halos around their head, which means that somewhere in some canon of saints, the three magi are listed as saints of the Catholic Church. In fact, if you go into my community notes or my community posts on this YouTube channel, you'll see there's a tapestry. It's a tapestry based off of a piece of artwork that I can't recall the name of the artist. But in it, the three magi are depicted with halos around their heads, which means somewhere, at some point in history, they were included in the canon of saints and venerated. And I think it should also be noted that this depiction of the nativity scene is hanging in the hall of the seminary of St. Pius, of the Society of St. Pius X in the United States. So either the Magi were never canonized or venerated as saints, or they were. The fact that they show up in artwork as having halos, and that this artwork has never been condemned, I think speaks volumes. And I think that's it shows that there isn't, as Wolfgang Smith proves in his essay, there isn't a superstition underlying astrology in its pure form. Yes, there have been people who have fallen into superstition, but the use does not, or the abuse does not negate the use. This is a very common, a very common platitude that we hear in on the internet, on Catholic internet, especially when it comes to the discussion of priests and bishops abusing laity, nuns, and children. Along with, say, liturgical abuses. Just because there's a liturgical abuse does not negate the use of liturgy. Well, just because someone abuses the use of astrology in its truest sense does not negate the use of true astrology. And then as Valentin Tomberg takes that just a step further and says that just because someone abuses the use of true magic does not negate the use of sacred magic. And I don't know if that is a decent conclusion to sum things up or not, but there it is. There you have it. If you enjoy this content, especially if it brings good fruit into your life, then I humbly ask that you all consider liking this video, sharing it, and subscribing to the channel. Maybe even hitting the bell icon so that you can be notified whenever I upload another video. So until then, my dear unknown friends, let us close with prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen.